do you find self-belief sometimes becomes a competitive nature between too many self-believers in the boardroom, or they got that sixth sense of self-aware in addition to self-belief?
I think you're getting into the my coaches who are the leadership specialists here. So I'm going to have to possibly use some borrowed wisdom because it's I wouldn't say that it's necessarily my speciality in terms of self belief in the boardroom, but I do think that there's a fine line between self belief and arrogance, and making sure that you monitor yourself to try and do that. That I know that's easier said than done, but also I think you mentioned the word vulnerability, and again, borrowing wisdom from my business coach clients. What's happening in the leadership space, which is exciting, is encouraging leaders to be vulnerable, encouraging leaders to be able to turn around and say, well, actually, I don't have the answer to that. Encouraging leaders to give the space for somebody else to step in and come up with a solution, in maybe even in a boardroom situation where they'll say, I'm listening, and I concede the floor to you, to give you the floor for your ideas. That comes from having so much self-belief that you're confident to show the vulnerability that comes from that. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. It
People who
does.
have genuine self-belief can allow chinks of vulnerability to come out. So I guess in a boardroom situation, that's how I would describe that as showing up.
How important is, in your opinion, Annie, now in the age of content being generated on the fly? Some content is not being written by the individual we think that they wrote the content. Let's talk a little bit authenticity in as an advantage right now. Authenticity in your world. But do you feel like the non-authentic stories are finding their way into the world? And how do you decipher which is authentic, which is not? How do you elevate the authentic stories up? And because those are the genuine ones out there.
It's true that the AI generated stories are so good now that it's almost becoming actually impossible to tell. It's sad but true. The when a story is real, when a story is authentic, there's still some kind of content that you can read it and it just sounds so plastic that you can tell. But that's going to fade away as it becomes the much more refined. One answer that I have is that you have to look at the source of that story. So, for example, if you come to Story, and we're the ones creating the social media campaign for our clients, you can trust that those stories are real. So we are known. We want to become increasingly known for real human generated stories. So that is almost an inadequate compensation that you can have by saying, if you go to this person, you know that it's part of their code of ethics. That's one thing that you can do. But also, we're moving very much into you talked about this earlier about personal branding. If you're telling a genuine story about yourself and you push that through AI to tighten up the grammar and so forth, that's actually okay because it started with a human story. And there's something about a personal branding story that when you read it, you say, okay, this happened. Again, it's very inadequate, but that's the approach that we're taking.